Well, hello everybody. So I am required by my own self conscience to formally apologize to Apple Incorporated. Let me explain. So, I have been saying bad things about the iPhone recently, and I wanted to apologize. I have tested every major phone purchased at Best Buy and every phone that I could possibly purchase at Apple, including the 13 Pro, 13, 13 Mini, 13 Pro Max. And even though the iPhone has problems with keeping a charge or it charging and on charging, charging and on charging, I would like to apologize to Apple anyway because even though it has a problem with charging and on charging, I still want to say I am sorry to Apple, and you guys make the best phones other than Samsung. Your phones don't overheat like the OnePlus or the Google Pixel devices. And Motorola makes good phones, but they don't water resist their phones, and I think that's a shame. Yeah, at the end of the day, you guys have the fastest millimeter wave results on Verizon's and T-Mobile's mid-band speeds with that Qualcomm, and I just wanted to say absolutely crazy speeds. As for the camera, the shift stabilization is some of the most amazing stabilization I have ever seen on any cellular devices. Unfortunately, the YouTube API app, the app of the iOS app, doesn't take use of the stabilization feature of the actual iPhone. And I hope that one year they do because it would be as stable as broadcasting from a Samsung device without having to use a gimbal. When I live stream on YouTube, I use the Samsung phone because it has built in stabilization through the YouTube API. When using the native camera, it has stabilization, and through the iPhone, it does not. But however, your apps are stable pretty much on the iPhone. Pretty much for the most part, nothing ever F's up on these iPhones. And on Samsung devices, I would say the stabilization feature, even through the YouTube API, is still better than any stabilization feature I've ever seen on any other phone. So I want to say thank you to Apple for making a solid device. And I want to say to Google to please stop making phones that overheat and turn off data services. That should be illegal. Not illegal, but that should be remedied and fixed. And as for Samsung devices, I wanted to thank the people in South Korea for making a very solid device. I apologize to everybody that said stick with Samsung and Apple. I'm not going to ever buy a OnePlus device again, even if they have 1,000 watt charging, even though that's not possible. If they ever have 100 plus watt charging, I don't care if they have 200 watt charging. If OnePlus company wants to get a hold of me, I am a very bad critic when it comes to these devices. I will criticize everything, even if I lose sponsorships. Even if I was offered sponsorships to make their devices look good, I will never do that. I'll be really the only creator on this platform when it comes to cellular connection, quality of service, and everything in between. At the end of the day, I have tested all major phones, including pretty much all the phones. I've tested all the phones. I've tested Motorola phones, Samsung phones, iPhones 12s, 13s, 11s. And the 11 sucked with the connectivity because of that crappy Intel modem. However, with the 12 and the 13, it was Qualcomm all the way. And I'm sorry, but Qualcomm makes the best connectivity. When it comes to connectivity itself, when it comes to having an antenna to make a phone call, Qualcomm seems to do the best, especially in the state of Texas. At the end of the day, after all the phones I've tested, battery wise, brightness, quality of gaming, like even though I'm having issues with the charger on my device here, this one here with the 5G, the iPhone is so good with the battery optimization that it's actually kind of scary how well iPhones do with that battery optimization feature. And as for Samsung devices, I love the fact that I am able to download things on it, natively, and not have to worry about going through the iOS atmosphere. So sorry, Apple Incorporated, uh, for making bad results on the iPhone. Because right now I'm actually broadcasting from an iPhone, and I'm not having any issues. It's not overheating. It's not getting hot. It's just working. It works. Thank you. And I'm broadcasting over 5G right now, and it's not even a little bit hot. So thank you, Apple, for your optimization. Uh, Google, you need to fix your phones. OnePlus, if you're a Chinese company, email me at my business email, and maybe I will review your unit. But if I don't like it, I don't like it, period. Because overheating is the biggest problem when using a cell phone, and it also drains the battery and breaks the electronics on the devices prematurely. So overheating is a big no-no. You can't overheat. That is a huge no-no. So Samsung devices are epic. iPhones are epic when it comes to stabilization of the cameras. Sometimes iPhones are buggy, but usually Apple will fix those issues within a month or two. Not more than a month or two. There's usually a fix. For Samsung devices, they usually come out within like 2 or 3 months, and they'll fix things. With OnePlus, it could take a year. It could take 6 months. It may never happen. With Google Pixels, they literally tell you that if the phone overheats, it'll turn the data off. No, you can't have a phone turn the data off no matter how hot the phone gets. If you need to make it an emergency phone call, you need to be able to make it an emergency phone call. Unless I never tried calling emergency services, but you should be able to make a phone call even if the phone is really hot. What it should do is just like the other phones. If it gets too hot, it stops charging. That is the one thing that should happen on all devices, including the Google Pixels. I will literally nitpick every single problem that any phone has. I don't care if it makes me look bad to these companies. I will nitpick every problem, and I will tell you exactly what's happening. I'm not these big YouTubers that will say, oh, look at how great the cameras are. Oh, look at the photography of the camera. No, no, no. I will tell you exactly what I think is wrong with it and what should be improved. For the Google Pixels, Google needs to stop overheating these phones, needs to get with some sort of cellular maker that can fix issues with overheating in these devices. They need to come out with something that can actually fix the overheating issue and stop turning the data off when overheating. They need to come out with some thermal something. I don't know how these cellular provider or these cell phone companies do it. I don't know how they make it to where they don't overheat as much. I genuinely do not. I know that with iPhones and Samsung, when the phone gets too hot, it'll switch off millimeter wave and it'll go back to regular 5G. And if it's too hot, it'll switch over to LTE unless if it's too hot. I know that for a fact. I've tested it. OnePlus, the Google Pixel goes over to millimeter wave. It gets hot for like a couple seconds. Boom, switches over to LTE. It doesn't even give it like 5 minutes. It overheats like boom. iPhone overheats within like 5 minutes of doing it, and the Samsung overheats within like 5 minutes of doing it. But somehow, some way, these companies have come up with a way to stop the overheating, period, on millimeter wave. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that in a cell phone. Maybe with a 4 nanometer, 3 nanometer, somehow maybe processor that could get that barely produces any heat, but it's super fast with a great antenna. 2 nanometer, I don't know. Eventually, I'm sure these cell phone companies are going to come out with a phone that will not overheat on 5G. No matter how many speed tests you do, no matter what you're downloading. Like if I download, let me give an example. If I download Genshin Impact, it says over 10 gigabytes through millimeter wave with Verizon on an iPhone, it actually disconnects from millimeter wave after about 2 or 3 minutes because of overheating. However, the phone doesn't turn the data off, it just switches over to 5G. Now, hopefully in the future, they come out with a device that won't overheat no matter what you do on it and doesn't even get hot on millimeter wave. There has to be a day where that will not happen. And unfortunately, I don't know when that's going to happen. But somehow, some way, these providers need to have better thermal cooling, and that's a problem with the phones get faster the more heat is produced. So eventually, there is going to become a time where all cell phones in the future, if there is a future, will not overheat anymore based on the architectural design of these cellular devices. I want to see a phone, which I know iPhone will eventually do it, on a Samsung. Like I'll give you an example, and this is what makes me pissed off. The S20 had millimeter wave, right? The S20 had millimeter wave. The S21 has millimeter wave, and the upcoming S22 will most likely have millimeter wave. It will. But can Samsung create a phone that can hit 4 gigabits per second like the iPhone? For some reason, the iPhone can hit 4 gigabits per second 2 times as fast as the best speed results I've gotten on a S21 Ultra or an S20 Ultra. I don't understand why, but for some reason, the Google Pixel and the S21 Ultra do not hit the 4 gigabit or even 3.7 gigabit mark like the iPhone 12 and 13 can. And I don't know why, but the 12 and 13, if you're right next to the millimeter wave site, can hit up to 4 gigabits per second with no issues. It does get hot, it will overheat, and then you have to cool it down to connect back to it. However, the Samsung device doesn't get quite as hot for an extended period of time, but the speeds are not as fast. So that is kind of weird to me how Samsung is not optimized, and the iPhone is optimized for millimeter wave. And I think this is bullshit, to be honest. People pay a lot of money for these cellular devices, and I genuinely believe that the Samsung devices should be just as fast on millimeter wave as the iPhones at 3.7 gigabits per second, which maxes out the node, I guess, coming from the node of the antenna. And it should, the millimeter wave antenna should be pushing out 4 gigabits per second. I don't know what gigahertz it is. I forgot the gigahertz. I'm not a technical professional. But hopefully one day. Now, I'll give you another little tip of advice about Apple iPhones. If you do get a 13 or a 13 Pro Max or Pro, and you live in a big city and you live in an area where T-Mobile has what's called ultra capacity, I actually recommend getting that plan. It is so fast. I mean, you could literally, if you are watching this live stream and you live anywhere in an ultra capacity city, if you do get T-Mobile prepaid or postpaid, I dare you to go do speed tests while walking down a neighborhood or wherever you see the ultra capacity on your phone icon, depending on which phone you have. You will literally see speeds of like 500 to 900 megabits down and up to 100 megabit upload. I've seen 150 megabit upload in the middle of nowhere, San Angelo, Texas, a random small to medium sized city. I was pulling over 900 megabits per second down in a small city in Texas that nobody really goes to. Let me explain why they don't go to San Angelo. Okay, if I put in, let me go to Amarillo, Texas from like San Antonio. It goes straight away from San Angelo. If I put I'm going to El Paso, you're not going through San Angelo directly. If I put I'm going to Albuquerque, it does say to go through San Angelo, but most of the time it'll tell you there's a faster route around San Angelo. So unless you're specifically going into that part of Texas, nobody goes through San Angelo. So it's just kind of a bypass city. Nobody knows about it. But T-Mobile did put ultra capacity out there, and I get over 900 megabits per second down on a few towers out there. And it stays connected as you're driving through the town. You'll see all the 500, 600 megabits. So if you're in a major city and you don't leave out into the country much, I would recommend getting a T-Mobile plan. If you are a remote person, you live out in the boonies, in Texas specifically, you probably either want to have AT&T or Verizon, or both, because rural coverage is very spotty in some areas. Very hard to get rural coverage out there. There's just not enough towers, and that makes sense because it's a rural area. Now, thank you, iPhone, for having good speeds. I want to say thank you very much. I want to say thank you to Samsung for having the best stabilization of any Android phone. Nothing's out there like that yet, and the S22 is probably going to blow out the S21 like it usually does, or it'll be slightly better. Well, at least we'll get 8K 30 frames per second probably. And thank you for the iPhone for that excellent battery life and millimeter wave and the excellent mid-band and even the iPhone 13 and 13 mini and 12 and 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. So thank you for these devices. Have yourself a good day. That's all I want to talk about. Thank you for actually having phones that don't overheat.